Good afternoon, and thank you for joining this afternoon's Cuppa Club with Alasdair, Hannah, and Stephen from Aerospace Kinross Scientific and Educational Trust. My name is Paul Pizzala, and I am the Senior Investment Manager at Ethex, working with the team on their offer. So, before we get started, there is some housekeeping to do. And I'd like to let you know that the Cuppa Club is recorded and made available for you to watch. And we will be sending on an edited highlights version too. Also to say that this is not a financial promotion. And if you need financial advice, please do talk to an independent financial advisor. As many of you know, our regular joiners, the Cuppa Club usually runs for 30 to 45 minutes. And it's a really great opportunity to meet and ask questions of the directors and hear about why Aerospace Kinross is such an impactful organization. And it's a really good opportunity for the team to explain how they achieve their goals and what your investment is going to be funding. So please do feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and we will take those questions as we go along. Before the team at Aerospace Kinross introduce themselves, the product on offer is part of a government match funding package to create an educational and tourism facility to inspire children and to regenerate the local community. Aerospace Kinross are raising a minimum of £250,000 as a 7-year bond with an indicative interest rate of 5%. It benefits from IFISA and social investment tax relief eligibility. The overall target is to reach £500,000. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Alasdair, Hannah, and Stephen to introduce themselves.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Paul, for this opportunity. I am a retired banker, but I hope you won't hold that against me. I'm also a glider pilot and a holder of a private pilot's license. And this is where the idea sprung from in terms of creating what we're talking about today. As a glider pilot, the personal development I achieved from that was really quite significant. Getting into principles of flight, navigation, meteorology, and so forth was really great from a personal development standpoint. And it occurred to me that it would be good to share this with younger people. And to that end, in 2013, we started to look at the possibility of creating Aerospace Kinross. Aerospace Kinross was first incubated in the Kinross Partnership, which is a rural development partnership for this neck of the woods. And we formed Asset and Ask in 2015. And the last thing I would say is the most important thing is I'm married with 2 adult children and 5 grandchildren.
Brilliant,
Stephen.
brilliant. Thanks. Over to you, Stephen.
Hi there. Yes, so I'm Steve. I'm probably the space part of Aerospace Kinross. I run one of the outreach strands that we do, the mobile planetarium. So I'm generally traveling around Scotland and the rest of the UK, traveling, promoting space, astronomy, and dark skies. Through the work I do in planetariums. Just last year, I was voted in as the current president of the British Association of Planetarium. I'm also an elected fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, and I've been working with them on a particular project which takes carers out to remote and rural places in Scotland for respite breaks. That's been part of their 200th anniversary funds. What else? I'm also a Churchill Fellow. I travelled to the US in 2017 to capture an eclipse in 360 degrees to show that in the planetarium. And while I was over there for a couple of months, I also worked with science centres in 5 different states, and really got a feeling for, for some of the science centres and discovery centres that are in the US. And yeah, so I have lots of experience with space, astronomy, and dark skies, and that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Great, brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. That's really great to hear. And over to you, Hannah.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Hannah. My background is in education, so that's been my focus since coming on board with Aerospace Kinross. I was originally a primary school teacher, and before that I worked in an aquarium locally, so got a real taste for STEM education and outreach with young children, which led me then to do my degree at Edinburgh University in teaching. And then I taught for about 8 years, and then I actually really found a passion for teaching STEM subjects and science to the kids, and wanted to do more of that. So I started my own business, a franchise business called Mini Professors, and it's focused around teaching children that are age 2, so as young as 2, to about 8 years old, all about STEM with really hands-on interactive experiments and experiences. I then ended up teaching Alasdair's granddaughter in my classes, and through that was how we met. And then, yeah, was really passionate about what these guys are looking to do, and came on board. So I've been responsible for a number of projects, sort of education-wise, getting into schools. Most notably, recently we ran the Schools Air Race Challenge, so more on the flight side of things, but also linking in space and aeronautics and things. And we reached over 2,500 pupils across the whole of Scotland. So it was a remote challenge, and I will go into a wee bit more detail about that later on, and give you some examples of some of the amazing work that the kids do. We're also out and about at the moment in the high schools running the hydrogen challenge with another company, and we've reached again another thousands of sort of S2 pupils building little Lego hydrogen powered cars, and showing them sort of the impact of renewables and sort of different fuel sources of the future. So yeah, I've been up to lots of bits and pieces, and my plan is to develop our education offering further with my knowledge of the curriculum and things to really make it stand out.
Brilliant. That's really excellent. Thanks so much for the introductions, Hannah, Alasdair, and Steve. Very, very, very strong impact is about educating and inspiring children, and we'll come onto that a little bit more. And I also know we've had quite a detailed question already, which from Harold, which I will pick up and feed into the conversation later, because I think it's quite a key question for the team to answer. But before I do that, I'm going to ask, can you explain what Aerospace Kinross is, and what your plans and visions, including explaining the relationship with assets? That would be a great one to answer, please. Thank you.
I think that's one for me. So Aerospace Kinross is the public-facing trading arm of the charity. Aerospace Kinross is a community interest company, so it's asset locked. It is owned 100% by Aerospace Scientific Educational Trust, which is the Community Benefit Society, and registered with the Scottish charity regulator. So our plans are, as we've alluded already, to create a discovery centre themed on flight and space exploration. Some of you may not be aware, but Kinross is the centre of the known universe, and half of Scotland's population live within 1 hour's drive of here. So that's a tremendous pool of an audience for us. Our expectation is that in the early years, our visitor attraction will pull in 50,000 family visits and 10,000 school visits per annum. When I say school visits, I mean pupils. So about 60,000 visitors in the early years, and we're expecting over the course of time to double that. As has already been identified, the idea is to create a play-based informal education facility with lots of hands-on interactives, flight simulators, audio, visual experience of an awesome magnitude, space missions, and to generally showcase what the aerospace sector corporates are doing at the moment and in the future, also working with universities and other academic institutions to showcase what they're up to. And finally, we would like to shine a light on some of the amazing humanitarian aviation-linked charities that are engaged in this aerospace sector. We don't describe ourselves as a museum, but we do want to pay homage to local aviation heritage. And if people who visit our centre want more information about historical aspects of flight and space exploration, we would be pointing them to the likes of the National Museum of Flight in Scotland. So hopefully that gives you an overview and the vision of what it is we're trying to create.
Brilliant. That's great. And I would this be a good point, Alasdair, for Hannah to talk about build a plane, or shall we save that treat for a little bit later in the conversation?
That's not really Hannah's bag. That would be more mine, and I would put it in later. Yeah.
Okay. Super duper. That's brilliant. Okay. So, our investors really keen to understand some of the specific impacts of the centre and what you're doing. So could you explain or tell us what the need for this venture is and what the impacts it will have on the lives of people and the local economy, and especially the opportunities that it creates for a better society? And I think that's a question for both Alasdair and Hannah.
Yeah, so if I could just give the background in terms of the need, the aerospace sector is burgeoning in size and importance, and it is a key government growth target. But against that background, there's a skills shortage across the UK. There's also educational pressures or pressures on the education system, which are well rehearsed in the public domain. And I don't need to go into them here, but allied to that, perhaps partly because of these pressures, there is a degree of underachievement in Scotland on the educational front. And we are also very close to some areas of multiple deprivation where there's lack of opportunity. So we're looking at that need right on our doorstep and hoping to service it. In terms of impact, it would be inspiring young people to make better life choices than perhaps I made when I decided to become a banker. There's so much more to life than that. It was a great career, but we want to give them the opportunity to have better outcomes. And up until this point, through the work of Stephen and Hannah and others, we've been able to reach thousands of young people. But our ambition is to grow that to tens of thousands each year, hundreds of thousands over the 7 years of this bond. We also seek to engage the community, the local community, both in terms of groups, youth organisations and the likes, and individuals through volunteering. And all of that hopefully will help to stimulate the local economy, creating good quality jobs for the likes of science educators like Hannah. And Stephen, I know that you've got lots of social impact information that you could perhaps share in this context. And
sure, yeah. So you obviously one of the main remits of the centre is going to inspire the next generation, the children. But over the last sort of 8 years or so, when I've been working with the carers organisation in Edinburgh to take mostly adult carers, but some young adult carers to remote and rural places around the country, you really see the benefit of not only the sort of the science and everything that goes around that and possibilities for the future, but just for giving people coping mechanisms. So when we take people to dark skies, to get a chance to certainly from the carer's point of view, to get away from that stressful role that they're dealing with every day, usually quite complex and challenging situations, and you give them tools to cope with those types of situations. So if you can take them away to somewhere dark or to a centre where you can inspire them to look up, to think about the big picture, those problems at home become a little less of an issue. And we have years and years of feedback on that process as we went through the work with the Royal Astronomical Society, and in fact that research will get published in the next year or two. But yeah, so there's lots of strands that you can bring into a science discovery centre, which maybe doesn't seem like it would be something that you'd find there, but it can really help with well-being and other aspects of life as well. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just realised I muted myself. So no, that's a brilliant answer, Stephen. Thanks so much for that. That's great. I'm going to come on to sort of some of the more financial aspects of the bond offer in this question. But first of all, I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to, whilst you respond, feed in a couple of questions that we've had from the audience relating to the project and the finances. So first of all, we've had lots of interest from our investors, and we've got off to a pretty good start actually with the offer. However, some of our investors have asked the question: what does space flight and air travel have to do with environmental impact? And I wonder if you could specifically answer that question in the context of the centre and your planned activities.
Stephen, I think you're the man for that one.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk on sort of a wider role of with regards sort of the environment within what we do with space technology. So, for example, pretty much everything we know about climate change, or certainly all the recent data that we've gathered, is from Earth-facing satellites. We wouldn't know half of the issues with the environment if it wasn't for these type of satellites. So there's a real need for that message to get across. I know you see a rocket take off and you think, carbon footprint and everything that's been launched there, but without all this new technology in low Earth orbit, we wouldn't have half of the information that we need. With regards to the centre itself, we will be encouraging children to look at these new innovative sort of technologies that are coming online within the space and the flight sector. So, for example, a company here in Scotland, Skyrora, they're looking to launch from Scottish soil, one of several companies, and they're looking at using biofuels rather than fossil fuels, which saves around about 90% of the carbon. And also, when you think about the footprint of sending satellites around the world, Scotland has, through CubeSats, has one of the biggest manufacturer bases for satellites in the world, but they have to be shipped halfway around the world to be launched. So imagine the capability within Scotland and UK where we can be launching our own satellites. environmentally becomes a lot more sustainable over time. There's lots of different strands with regards to that, and if you're inspiring the next generation, there's innovations within flight as well, you know, new electric engines and things like that. So we'll be really pushing those environmental credentials, and also thinking from the ground up when we build the centre about our own environmental credentials, and whether that's you know, solar panels, possibly you know, wind turbines and things like that, and also lighting, as well as all the other stuff we do. I'm also a International Dark Sky Association Dark Sky advocate, and within that we think about light pollution and the problems that that causes around the country. So so yeah, there's lots of lights that are switched on at light that don't need to be. In fact, over about 35% of the light in the UK is wasted every year. Just think of the cost of the carbon footprint and everything that goes into that. So all these strands will be built into the story that we're trying to tell within the centre, and you just don't know where the next innovation will come from. And it might come from somebody who's inspired after possibly visiting our centre. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, brilliant. Sorry, Alasdair, you were going to say.
Yeah, I think this is where Hannah could come in and explain, you know, what she's been doing with the Air Race Challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the vein of what we were discussing there as well, even our choice of site, you know, repurposing a building that's lain empty for 15 years, but is quite an iconic building in the local community, you know, having that reused and celebrated and repurposed rather than building something new and completely different. So it's a good use of that as well. But no, certainly, as I say, my background is more the education side of things. So I get really passionate about inspiring young people and giving them opportunities and you know, career ideas that they might never even considered. And a big part of some of Steve's talks as well, he talked a lot about Scotland's place within that. And although we want to be global and talking about the world and all these different opportunities across the world, I think it's nice for children to see on their doorstep what's happening, and, you know, satellites being launched from Scotland, and, you know, they could be a part of that, you know, bits of the James Webb Telescope being constructed in Scotland and that kind of thing. So it's a really good opportunity. So with that in mind, the Air Race Challenge, which has been my baby for the last little while, as I say, we reached over 2,500 pupils, and it was a remote challenge that was originally designed by one of our board members, who is a professor at the University of the Highlands and Islands. And he's actually himself researching electric flight as well, so electric powered aeroplanes, and has been testing those. So originally the challenge was designed to reach remote schools that maybe don't have access to, you know, STEM capital and places on their doorstep that they can go and visit or get the bus to, kind of thing. And he sent them sort of quadcopters. So we sent little tiny drones for the kids to actually fly within the classroom, and a number of challenges to complete associated with that. So we also partnered with CERC, a local organisation who are all about sort of science education, and they are now working with us that every child that took part in the challenge receives a Young STEM Leader Award. So it was based around principles of discover, create, lead, and all sorts of different opportunities within that. So I've got some sort of quotes from schools that took part in the challenge that I thought I could share, just to give you a flavour of the kind of stuff they got up to. So one school had said they had no real knowledge of the aviation industry beforehand, so everything they did was a learning opportunity. They learned about famous people in aviation, how to fly the drones. There was lots of teamwork and creativity. The levels of fun, engagement and excitement and achievement was obvious. It turned into a whole school STEM community event. They invited parents in, they involved the younger classes. And a lovely quote here: our whole school community came together with a sense of achievement. When hurdles occurred, the children worked together to communicate and develop their resilience. Their exploration, testing and demonstrations created a scaffold of learning, laughter and supports the school visions. So, you know, from a small scale project that was started, you know, a while ago now, being able to reach this number of pupils and give that level of inspiration, I think is really powerful. And we hope to develop it further as well. So I don't know if I've got a quick example of the kind of things that one of the schools produced, just to give you a quick flavour of what we did. So I'm going to just share my screen. hopefully you can see that nice and clearly there. So we've got a school made this beautiful presentation of all the things that they got up to. So this was a school in Dunfermline. So they started off looking at paper planes, the theories of flight. The children all recorded these amazing videos and talked about their design process. And they did stuff at home. Do you know, they took it so far. They did risk assessments. They had their high vis on for flying the little quadcopters. They looked at, you know, obviously scientific data. They spoke to a Royal Navy chap who was a pilot. They had an EasyJet pilot in. So many opportunities to really deepen and enrich their learning. They looked at, you know, famous figures in aviation. They did job interviews for different roles that they wanted to have within that. They did their own Canmore International Airport in the school. So, you know, the depth that they took this to with just our little bit of, you know, influence and our little bit of inspiration was just phenomenal. And I think that really, you know, with a small team at the moment, there's just a few of us that are, you know, some of us part-time, self-employed. We're a small team at the moment, and we've already reached, as Alasdair said, thousands of kids. But with the potential of a venue, we could be reaching, you know, hundreds of thousands eventually. So that's really our goal in the end.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that, Hannah. That's really brings it to life in such a powerful way. So thanks for that. I'm gonna go into a bit of nitty-gritty detail now. I'm going to read out this question verbatim, if I may, and I think it's one for Alasdair. So Harold says, "It's a great scheme, and I'm very keen on it, but I have a couple of questions about the offer itself. Number one, the investment offer describes the bond as effectively a bridging loan, which will be repaid from agreed government funding through the Tay Cities deal. But it also says assets' ability to repay the bonds is dependent on it being able to secure finance from third parties and or future bond investors. And there is no guarantee that there will be sufficient finance available to repay all the bonds." So he goes on to say, which is correct.
Yes, so the Tay Cities deal award is 1.6 million, and it is scheduled for disbursement to us at the end of the deal period. This is a 10-year regional economic development deal. It's a £300 million deal, and ours is a small crumb off that table. So we've been awarded 1.6 million, but our award is not going to be dispersed until the end of the deal. So it'll come to us in the years 20, 28, 29, 30. And therefore, this bond issue allows us to accelerate things by effectively getting going now, on the understanding that when that Tay Cities deal money comes through, it'll be there to repay the bond. I would need to make it absolutely clear, it's not secured on that money. It is not ring-fenced, if you like, for repayment of the bond. The Tay Cities money has to be claimed against eligible expenditure. So when we buy the site and when we repurpose the site and when we buy content and so forth, we will be laying down an audit trail of expenditure that we have incurred to be able to reclaim that money from the Tay Cities offer. And then when we get that money, it'll be used to repay the bond. The second part of the question relating to third parties is really the total project cost is 3.2 million. We've raised 60% thus far, principally that 1.6 million, plus we have a commitment of £250,000 from a local trust, the Ganachie Trust. So we've got 1.3 million to find. Now, this offer, we don't yet know how much will be gathered from this bond offer. In our financial document, we've suggested 300,000 from the Ethex bond offer. And to complete the funding, we will need to get other grants from other funders and a medium-term loan, a kind of mortgage, if you like, over the property. So the success of this bond offer will drive the amount that we need to raise elsewhere. And that's where the third-party dependency comes into the equation. So the more success we have here, the less we need to depend on other sources of funding. I would say that the others that we've put in the bond document, Social Investment Scotland, Charities Aid Foundation, are already warm to what we're doing, and they're waiting to hear how we'll get on. And in terms of the medium-term loan, Perth and Kinross Council would be willing to consider granting us the medium-term loan. Councils, local authorities are strapped for cash, but they can borrow on the market and pass it on to us. So in principle, they're prepared to do that. It would, of course, be subject to formal approval by the council, as is indeed the case with the other match funders.
Brilliant. That's a great answer. Thank you so much for that. And then there's just one small clarification point to follow on from that, Alasdair. And it says that there isn't reference to the interest payments being covered by the grant. The table on page 17 shows the bond, but not interest being paid. Is the interest covered by the grant? If not, how is it?
The interest is already built into our financials, which you'll see on the following pages, page 20. So we've produced a table there that have allocated interest for the entire cost, if you like, within our detailed financials, which are not, as the question implies, not spelled out in the offer document.
So it's like an accrued interest, basically, isn't it? That's
yes.
By bonds. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. That's great. Super. I think you sort of touched a little bit on this next question, Alasdair. So maybe a summary of what you've already said, or a couple of extra points to consider. So I think you've covered, what is the current position on funding. So that's great. But also maybe you can talk a little bit about the current position on planning and site acquisition too. I think that would be really helpful for people to get a feel for where you are in your overall project development.
So on site acquisition, we have been talking to the vendor for some time. He acquired the site from the Ministry of Defence in 2008, and his initial expectation was that it could be redeveloped for housing, but the planners were not buying into that. So we got into detailed discussions with him, and we agreed heads of terms, which don't have any legal status other than they are a memorandum of understanding, if you like. So we agreed heads of terms with him for the acquisition of the site. The site remains on the market, and we could lose it tomorrow. But I point to the fact that he's been trying to sell it for 15 years. On planning, we were able to get into the site and do detailed measurements and the likes with our architects and surveyors, and we therefore prepared a fairly advanced pre-planning application. So it was much more detailed than would normally be the case with a pre-planning application. And we submitted that to the council, who I'm glad to say have responded positively. Needless to say, there are lots of site investigations and professional surveys still to be pulled together for the full planning application. But as soon as we get the funding in place, we would be pressing on with that. The local people seem to be very much in favour of what we're trying to achieve. We're not encountering NIMBYs, we're encountering lots of enthusiasm and support. So we're not expecting any major issues with the planning application from local objections.
Brilliant. That's very clear. Thanks for that, Alasdair. That's really, really helpful. And final question from Harold. So if it's okay, Harold, I'm going to read out your full question. So Harold says, thanks in response to you, Alasdair, for explaining about the interest in the sources of funding. So he goes on to say, last ANORAC question. So glad to see Harold's got the sense of humour there. A, is the government grant subject to asset being a going concern in 2029? If so, then isn't that an obvious risk factor? And then second part of his question, the interest rate is defined in the bond instrument as 5% per annum, but the Ethex website describes the 5% as merely a target. Why is that?
So the situation with the Tay-Cities government grant is, this is a long, slow, laborious, multi-stage, repetitive process that projects have to go through, and we have to comply with the UK Treasury Green Book standards. So just to give you an indication, we started down that route at the tail end of 2021 with our strategic outline case. We then had to do a business justification case. That was followed up by an outline business case, and then finally a full business case. And each time you submit one of these, they come back, the government reviewers come back with questions for clarification, and you then have to clarify, update the business plan and resubmit. Our business plan currently is almost 400 pages. And it's 95% approved. So as soon as we get the approval of the business case by the governments, the 4 local authorities will enter into a legally binding contract with us. And at that point, the fish will be in the net. We will not go ahead with our development of the golf ball site if we don't have all the pieces of the jigsaw on the table. And of course, that is a key component of it. So I would reassure bond holders that we will not be spending your money unless we have fulfilled the full funding requirement of 3.2 million and got planning permission.
Brilliant. That's excellent. That's excellent answer. Sorry, Alasdair. There's more to come.
The second point was on the interest rate. So it is 5%. That's the maximum we're allowed to grant within the terms of the society's rules. We've pitched it at that level because we think that's a good interest rate. Well, you're not going to get that from the banks at the moment, so hopefully that's attractive.
And just to answer that sort of little fine detail point, Harold. I mean, we describe it as a target because that's the language that we're allowed to use when we're talking about these types of things in a public facing way. But effectively, the 5% target matches the 5% per annum as you've highlighted there. Brilliant. Well, that was really great to hear that level of detail and planning. And I know you've got an incredible board, a great team of professionals, and it's been a delight to work with you, Alasdair, too. So I can I can vouch for Alasdair's professionalism in what is a very complex project and a brilliant project too. I have seen some of the visuals, and you've produced some brilliant visuals in your documentation and your video. So I got a bit of a sense for what the centre is going to be like. But I wonder if you can, between you, paint a picture of what we're actually going to expect to see at the centre.
I think I'll defer to my colleagues on that.
Sure. Well, one of the main aspects within the centre is going to be a fixed planetarium. So at the moment we have a 6-metre mobile dome take out around the UK. Now that we still use that to help with remote and rural and things like that. But with a fixed planetarium within the centre, we can do so much more. We can really inspire from the ground up. The immersive environment of the planetarium is such a special place. And every day when I'm out with Mobile Dome, I get feedback on that regard. And whether it's from school children, yesterday I was at high school with S3 students, 14, 15 years old, which can be a little bit difficult to engage with. Every single one of the classes left with a smile on their face and a real joy, and a bit of extra energy within, sort of science and space. So yeah, having the ability to have a planetarium there, along with all the other flight and space themed stuff, is going to be incredible. Planetariums is my thing, so I'll make sure that is at a level that's going to be, on par with everything else in UK and actually around the world. And the centre itself, Hannah, do you want to talk a little bit more about the Imaginarium we've done for the rest of the centre?
Yeah, certainly. So I think we're looking for a kind of combination of presenter-led, because we think that's really important, having a face and someone there to get you excited about the content, and then some kind of interactive exhibits and bits and pieces. We've been working quite closely with some support from Glasgow Science Centre recently. So they've been giving us a lot of sort of creative advice and input, and really helping us strip it right back to what is important to us, and what is it, the message that we're trying to achieve. Do we want a combination of interaction and screens and artifacts, and looking at the different kind of visitors that we're looking to attract. But yeah, I think ultimately the planetarium will be the big showcase. We are also in talks with the challenger centres at the moment, so we've been chatting to those guys about potentially having almost like an escape room type experience for children and adults, I would assume. So we're talking about that, so that we bus in a load of children and they go into the sort of briefing room and get given a couple of challenges. They get split into 2 groups. One group will go through a virtual transporter into the International Space Station, for example, and the other team will be in mission control. So it's all about the children communicating with each other and doing all sorts of amazing things, presenters throwing problems at them and having them think on the spot and problem solve while they're there. But other than that, obviously we'll be looking to, if we secure that site, explore the heritage of that. There's a huge satellite dish inside the golf ball itself, so it'll be great to kind of celebrate that and talk about the history of it. But then the content, we also want to liaise with a lot of local kids and panels, and get feedback from young people themselves, rather than us thinking, oh, this will be great. But we want to involve a lot of focus groups and get the local community to help us decide on that kind of final content that's really going to excite them. And we also want to design it so that we can change it up, so it's not just going to be the same experience every time you come. We'll have visiting exhibitions, and different speakers. We'll have a kind of auditorium where we can invite Tim Peake, maybe, if he wants to come and visit us, to share his experiences, because I know he's a heavy STEM ambassador these days. He stepped down from his astronaut duties. So yeah, just looking to celebrate local companies, as Alasdair said, that are in the aviation industry, and yeah, it's just a bit of everything.
So we see it as a real voyage of discovery and taking our audience on a journey through space and time. And when they leave the centre, we hope that they will have that inspiration to go on and do some wonderful stuff in their own life, or work within the sectors that we are promoting. It really is, when we're thinking about the future the roles that we're going to be talking about and the roles that will hopefully be created on the back of the space sector here in the UK as it ramps up over the coming years will be amazing. And it'll be fantastic if we can have this site dedicated to bringing that dream alive on all the different levels that we've been talking about.
Can I just bring it back from outer space to the stratosphere as we know it, and just talk a little about the aviation side of things. So you mentioned earlier on, Paul, about the Build a Plane project. So one of the things we've done in a school locally is build a full-size aeroplane from a kit, and that introduced pupils to simple aircraft design, engines, avionics, showing the strength of a narrow gauge steel space frame covered in fabric, and how robust that can be, and how it can support life closer to the planet that Steve would like us to be. That was completed in 2018. It's subsequently flown for 650 hours, and we take children, we give them free flights in it. And we've just started our second Build a Plane project at another school, where we've got about 60 pupils involved in that one. The other thing I would like to add is charities that I touched on briefly. We have the likes of the Scottish charity Air Ambulance based at Perth. So we want to tell their humanitarian story. And another organisation that I'm involved with is called Mission Aviation Fellowship, which is the world's largest humanitarian airline. It flies small aeroplanes to reach vulnerable people in remote locations. So it flies into a couple of thousand jungle strips. We support organisations like UNICEF, Oxfam, Save the Children, you name it. So there is this breadth of the vision. The space side the tail tends to wag the dog at times. And you'll see I'm a wee bit sensitive to that coming from the aviation side. But it is that aerospace together just covers so many bases, and things like Hannah's able to focus on women in aerospace, and that there's the humanitarian side, there's the medical side of things. It covers all bases. It's a great canvas for us to paint on.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. I think we're sort of like coming up to the end of our allotted time, so I'm going to start to wrap up. There are a couple of more risk orientated and technical questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Alasdair to follow up on those separately in a bit of a round robin to investors. So I think they're important questions, and of course it's not entirely risk free, is it, Alasdair? But we'll come back to that later. So where are we today? The bond offer has got off to a good start. We're 7% raise of the £500,000 target, or 14% raise of the £250,000 target, and we're looking to get matched funding of around about 15,000, with the offer closing at the end of March. So would like Alasdair to sum up by saying, what would it mean to reach the £500,000 target, and give a short call to action, and then it will remain for me to do the outros and to thank everybody.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So just to emphasise, the offer closes on the 31st of March, and part of the reason for that is the social investment tax relief scheme falls away at the end of the month of March, or the end of the financial year, end of the tax year. And that 30% tax relief is obviously very attractive to eligible investors. We've closed the offer at the end of March to allow time for investors to have invested and the funds to have arrived in our bank account. The funds must be in our bank account before the 5th of April for this scheme to qualify for social investment tax relief. So the call to action is please, please, please help us to deliver this vision that we have. It's a win-win-win situation. It's a win for young people now and for years to come, for decades to come. It's a win for our local community in terms of bringing a disused asset back to life and engaging our people and our organisations locally. And it's a win for the investors as well, because it's a great offer, and why would you refuse it? That's all.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's excellent. Thanks so much for that. So it remains for me to say thank you to our audience for listening in. Really appreciate that. And just for the aerospace Kinross team to say farewell and bon voyage, and we'll look forward to updating you very shortly.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us, hosting us.
Thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye now.
Bye.